Welcome, everybody. I'm the chair of computer science. My name is Chris Yotian, if you haven't met me before. And I'm here to introduce Bill Bishop. He was working works at Palo Alto Networks, and is really going to talk about cybersecurity, data analytics, things like that. He's currently a business value manager there, and he drives business relevant messaging at the highly technical field of cybersecurity. And he's been the principal business consultant and practice director at Teradata for nearly 18 years, and helped dozens of Fortune 300 companies advance their analytic maturity and awareness and understanding of cybersecurity and things like this. He has extensive experience ensuring that valuable information assets are managed efficiently and effectively to be exploited by analytic tools, techniques to deliver quantifiable value. And he has a patent pending framework and process. So lots of things. I suspect he might tell you some of this. And he holds a master's in business administration from the University of Denver. So one of our labs. We're really excited to have him. With a concentration in financing and marketing. And he lives in California currently. So let's welcome Bill.
Make sure. Okay, there we go. I think this is working. Well, thank you, and thank you for the offer to share a little bit about what I've seen in the data analytics and cybersecurity area. Just to kind of level set, I've never really been on the technology side, but I've always learned enough to be dangerous. I really do fall back on my experience with finance. I've always been dogmatic about any investment in technology had better be accountable to business outcomes and business value. Because what I'm concerned about is communication to the C-suite and the board. So a little bit of my background so you can see where I'm coming from. I was with, as Chris mentioned, I was with Teradata for nearly 18 years. And I was a practice director. Mostly focusing in on financial services industry. And so my bias and some of my stories are bent towards that area, but I have touched some other industries. So after leaving Teradata, I joined Palo Alto Networks, so cybersecurity, a whole new field. And one of the reasons what attracted me to Palo Alto Networks is here's a field that has grown up on selling technology. And it was easy to sell the latest, greatest shiny objects. And people were ingesting them, and we'll talk about that. But they realized, and I was also the cloud providers are realizing this too. AWS, Google, Azure are realizing that, we can't just sell the latest and greatest. We really do need to start messaging better to the C-suite and the board. And so that's why I was brought on board to do more of that. Like I said, I know enough about technology just to be dangerous, and I'm still coming up to speed in cybersecurity. I've been with Palo Alto Networks a little over a year now, I think 13 months, something like that. But it's funny, when I first got there, acronyms galore. It's like, what is this? I mean, no executive is going to be looking at this stuff, these acronyms. It's going to go right over their head. So it really is an industry that's tacking more towards being relevant for a business. So what I thought I'd share with you, at least what I've seen out there, and some of these I won't spend a whole lot of time on, kind of the pressures that companies are facing and how they're trying to tie in what I think is the best way to tie in to build business relevancy. Then I'll chat a little bit about the state of data. So I'm kind of harkening back to my experience at Teradata, large data warehousing, high concurrency. It's one of the fastest platforms on the planet, although other technologies are starting to catch up, and the cloud is giving them a lot of challenges. But I've seen a lot of data chaos out there. It amazes me how comical things are. All the way, one quick story, I was at one financial institution, and they had a server with a lot of their commercial accounts, data on it. And so where's the server? Oh, it's right here. And I'm looking at it, and it was literally chained to the leg of the table. And that had all the personal identifiable information for the executives in these commercial companies. It's like, wow, that's how you're protecting the data. So there's a lot of chaos like that. Anyway, so state of the data, and then a little bit about the state of analytics. And because it's what I do now, I touch on cybersecurity and how we approach kind of transforming from what has grown up in an organic model to more of a forward-thinking model about how to protect data and critical assets, IP and so forth. And then the last part is really trying to make sure that the value is communicated. And so a big advocate that it's all about the value. I mean, that's the end-all, be-all reason why these investments are taken. And value, obviously, also protecting the business. So I won't spend too much time on this. I can't remember the last time I opened a annual report. I used to, when I was in finance, way back when, I used to always go to the financials. But now I just go to the chairman's letter because you get all the buzzwords, what they're trying to convey, at least, fluffy language and so forth. Really a marketing rag to a certain extent. But I can tell you the last time I saw an annual report, it didn't talk about stripping out operational complexity, and that means stripping out cost. And these organizations have become so complex in their operations, particularly in financial institutions. A lot of legacy environments out there. And then, customer expectations, which has completely changed, which is also tied into the competition, is giving more tools to, at least in financial services, giving more tools to the customers so they can manage their own life journey, financial life journey, as well as purchases. I mean, we're finding a lot of people and companies do a lot of research before they even engage in the sales cycle, and so 80% of the sales cycle is already done by the time they actually engage, because they've already done their research. In the regulatory area, GDPR protection. I think it's kind of interesting, obviously that grew out of EMEA and Asia Pac, where they have a different philosophy of, no, the government should protect the citizens, where here in the States, it's more the Wild Wild West. No, citizens, you buyer beware. It's up to you to protect your data. So it's a different perspective, I think. In the States, although that's changing, because California as well as Washington, I think is even more strict as far as data protection. But going back to customer expectations, Facebook comes to mind. There's an expectation, a hope that they're protecting your data. That okay, you're doing a value exchange, and hopefully they are holding up their end of the bargain and protecting your data. And then obviously there's just more and more analytics driving the business, and we'll obviously talk about that, but this need for a greater analytic awareness and agility is just all over the place, which has actually caused a lot of problems. So we've all seen this pyramid, vision, goals, objectives, business outcomes, as you go down that pyramid, and then think about the kind of the analytic capabilities that are required to enable those business outcomes, those objectives, measuring those with KPIs, and then, okay, what do you need as far as data governance, applications to tie all this together. And I'm a big advocate of this framework that whenever there's an investment in any kind of technology, it's all constantly tied to the business drivers, and regularly, almost near real time, because you never know when an executive is going to say, hey, what's the status of this? I mean, business folks have ADD, I got ADD, and they say, oh, we made that investment, well, where's our return? Please tell me where the return is. And so it's always good to have that at your fingertips and understand what are the performance measures that you're driving. So a little bit on the state of data out there. It's obviously quite chaotic. When we look at all the source systems and then disparate data environments out there and cloud environments popping up, work with a lot of clients who are, you can tell they're embarrassed to say, we don't know how many cloud instances we have. They haven't even done an inventory of where their data is. And where, from my perspective, what's even more concerning is where it's being replicated again and again downstream. So there's a lot of chaos here, and because of this chaos and data's not curated properly, not that we're going to be all academic and there must be only one version of the truth, if you will. But a lot of the data scientists are, well, let me go grab the data because I can know I'm getting the context that I want from the source I want, and I'll build the delta of context that I want to do my analysis. And then obviously disparate reports, analysis, and confusing the end users, and particularly the C-suite, who I had an executive at a financial institution who literally said, if he goes to his data scientists and he'll ask 2 or 3 of them the same question, and I developed a rapport with him, and he said that I'll get 2 or 3 different answers, and I'll kind of pick which one I think might be, or I might even average them. And so it's literally that chaotic. And so the concern is with everybody's jump to the cloud is a lot of these environments, even some of these large repositories, are chaotic, and the idea of lifting those data models, those chaotic data models, and just lift and shift all the load protocols and everything, just lift those, put them up in the cloud with some tweaks. Highly inefficient, but now you got chaos in the cloud. Congratulations. So seeing a lot of that out there. Some of these metrics I love. The Strategy Advisory Council, they do a lot of strategy, enterprise strategy group, sorry. They do a lot of surveys and found that 52% of organizations, executives, felt their operations far too complex, and 66%, it's getting worse. It's not getting better, and it really is the case. To go back, as I warned you, some of my stories will be around financial services. They spent a lot of time in there. They have, their legacy environments with core deposits, consumer loans, card, and the executive, the EVP of card. You run your own business. You in mortgage, you run your own business. Wealth management, you run your own business. And we'll try to set these up as separate entities, and we'll measure it in management reporting as if you guys are like competing for resources and economic value add measurements. And so at some point they realized, ooh, wait a minute, product profitability was all the rage way back when. It's not products that bring value. That's ridiculous. It's, wow, it's the customers. What an epiphany. And so then, oh wow, we need to be more customer based. And we can't be peppering the poor customer. The card group just hammering away at the poor customer with offers, with the mortgage group, and obviously you do that with online, and you become irrelevant pretty quickly. And so a lot of corporations are, okay, let's see if we can get this holistic view of the customer, we'll chat a little more about this, and then manage those touches to the customer in a more cohesive way, but easier said than done, because they still haven't addressed the incentive compensation structures. And so it's like to tell the card people, hold off on what you're doing to these customers, because we're working them on their customer journey over here in another product group. Is pretty hard to tell, say that. They went, no, let me blast away, because my incentives are based on that. Another financial institution in one of their lines of business, very large line of business, on the upper half of this, in the pie chart, had quite a chaotic environment. And so we had messaged with them, helping him build the messaging, that they have a chaotic state. and over 3,000 data repositories, over 80,000 individual computing activities that were processes that were occurred, 36,000 files flying all around the organization, some electronically, some just through email, just quite chaotic, and let alone they're trying to back off of using a TIN or social security number as the customer identifier. So we got this data that's replicated all over the place. And so trying to get a handle on that and successful in messaging to the executives that this is not sustainable. We've got to do something about that. And so big effort to start to organize this. They'll never get down to one, that'd be ridiculous. But something south of 3,000 would certainly be better. And another point of, I think, of complexity is the whole regulatory environment. Not that I'm picking on Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan Chase, but I guess I kind of am. He complains a lot about how much he's spending in the regulatory arena to do their stress testing. And over, he puts $1 billion. And what's kind of comical is you look at what the government is looking for to make sure that they have sound capital is, wait, please tell me you have this data anyway. Well, they do. It's in their own risk processes. But what they've done, knee-jerk, is they've created a net new group that does just regulatory reporting. And so then you got more data replication. Why don't you just embed all that together so you can be singing off the same, your credit policies as well as your reporting, a lot of data commonality there, if you will. So cloud, obviously bringing more complexity but opportunity. So a lot of different reasons why people have gone to the cloud, but on the left-hand side, what's currently in cloud, non-mission critical to mission critical, for net new solutions. So a lot of different reasons in this survey. You could pick more than one, so it doesn't add up to 100%. You can pick more than one in this particular survey. But I think it's kind of interesting on the right-hand side, a lot of our clients have this initial idea that, the cloud, I can rip out costs. And okay, that's a tough one because do you just forklift data chaos into the cloud and now you need to buy more processing because it's so inefficient for the cloud and maybe do some tweaks? Or do you do a net new build to be academically perfect, if you will, and then now you're running both systems side by side, which is costly, or you do some kind of hybrid, something in the middle. I'm no architect, but from what I understand, something in the middle, a little more reasonable. But if someone was trying to shut down data centers very quickly, Accenture is probably a poster child for that and doing it fairly effectively. But those forklifts and then retool very quickly to take advantage of the efficiencies. But reduced cost is not the main driver. It's only a driver in that it increases scalability and improves business agility, allows them to do more test and learn capabilities. So that's really an outcome of, okay, if we want this kind of agility and scalability at certain times to go up and down, that's far more efficient than our data centers having a bunch of idle equipment that we try to do one-offs with our vendors. So I would just say reduced cost is kind of a secondary a result of, but then that cost of re-architecture is quite expensive. I was talking with a CIO of a very large financial institution, and this is about, I'll say about 4.5 years ago, I think. And he said that, yeah, we're definitely going to the cloud, but not yet. Because we're a little bit nervous about it, but on the other hand, I think the cloud's probably more secure than our data centers. But fast forward, they are shoving stuff into the cloud as fast as they can go. So a little bit on the state of the analytics, especially with this crowd, don't need to go through this as far as more descriptive reporting and then actually embedding this into the organization, actually getting those analytics out to the citizen data scientist. Certainly a objective. Apologize for this, I call this my Candyland slide. Too many colors on here. But one financial institution that I think is probably best in class at managing their customers in the journey. They look at awareness, they track awareness for each product or service that they offer. And they'll, okay, did they get media? Was it a store promo, direct mail, online ad? Did they see this? Are they aware of this offering? And this can translate to other industries. And then, oh, they clicked through it. Oh, they must be interested. Or they responded to interacted with a email. And then, well, and they asked maybe for more information, tell me more, which was sent out to them. And so they move along this awareness, interest, involved in financial services, maybe fulfilled, got the loan, got the credit card, funded the account, the wealth management account or whatever it might be, and then, activity or inactivity. What channels do they use? But I highlight this because the behavioral anomalies, and we'll touch on this a little bit further, are huge. As far as interacting, when you see something, oh, haven't seen that with that particular customer, and we define normal behavior by looking at the customer's activity over the last 6, 8, 12 months, and then, ooh, we see an anomaly. That breaks these bounds. We better interact with this customer because there's something going on. And then, okay, which ones do we interact with? Some customers interact with their most valuable customers, they retain them. Others have gone to, no, next tier down, see if we can't bump them up into the more valuable customers. And then, retention activities deployed or cross-sell. And then, looking at developing the customer and then making them an advocate for the institution. So when you think about all the products that a financial services institution offers, there's a ton of these journeys going on at one time. And so, how do you manage all that? And that's a lot of data. But it takes some pretty strict rules as far as how to manage this. And I'll say on the behavioral anomaly in financial services, when you look at someone who's done a significant transaction, let's just say a significant deposit, whoa, they've never done that before. It could be any number of things, anywhere from severance, huge bonus, closing another account, selling stocks, or whatever it might be. We found in analysis we've done 70% of those funds will be gone within 4 months. And so interacting with that customer who's done that significant transaction for them, maybe it wasn't significant for somebody else, but for them, you can get retention rates and conversion rates because you don't know if it's saving the customer, is it more, are they doing a small business, opening a small business? Do we need provide funding there, or maybe buying a house for their child or whatever? You can get like 40% conversions, which is huge. And it's literally like printing money. One side story, a number of years ago, we did this with a large U.S. financial institution, and so I was capturing all the metrics on this and figuring out how much money they were making off this, and it was we were printing money, and so we were sharing. Okay, this is the result of our solution, and it wasn't long until we're going to have somebody internally do that because they didn't want a vendor looking at how much money they're making. Geez, we might charge them more. So that was kind of interesting. This whole idea, it is starting to die down, this idea that we want a 360 view of the customer. I've never really understood, what does that mean? You want a 360 view of the customer. Oh, we want to know about our whole relationship. Okay, let's dissect that. So do you want to know about all the products, services, relationships they have with you? So that's one 360. But then you want to know about all the activity within all those, and so that's, what's that, 720. So that's another circle around. And then, you want to know about all the different channels, whether that goes into a branch, a store, online call center. So you want to know that too. So that's another circle around. And then once you have all that, then you want to know the value of the customer, to do customer profitability. So maybe you can do some discretionary pricing and differentiated service. And then you want to track their sentiment, infer their sentiment by their subtle little behaviors and behavioral anomalies. And then ultimately you want to get to a customer lifetime value to manage your customers to this ideal state, depending on different segments. So in doing this, I had a lot of clients that wanted to build this. And it's like, no, we don't just build this. We build it on specific uses first. And so you do it in increments. Okay, these product groupings, if you will, make sense. We think they could be bundled together. Let's get those together first. Let's look at the value that we, by testing this hypothesis on relationship-based, risk-based pricing, or differentiated service, or discounting, waivers, or whatever. Look at the value of that, and then once you have that piece, and then iterate and start building this 360, but you do it based on not on a purity academic perspective. Oh, let me get this built, and then they will come. This doesn't work, and so and business will always. I've seen way too many projects fail because, we weren't able to articulate what kind of value because we're still building it. It just doesn't cut it. And this idea of if we have some sort of business event, and this applies to cybersecurity, if there's some anomaly that has occurred that might be a threat potentially, or an anomaly in the customer behavior that might suggest a risk, attrition risk, or opportunity to cross-sell, upsell, whatever it might be. The faster you can get the data captured, the information delivered, and then do the analysis and take the action, the better. And we've done a lot of analysis of, okay, a unique, unusual behavior happened with this customer, and let's interact with them real quick, top of mind. So let's do it within 24 hours. And then with another institution, we did this East Coast, West Coast, and East Coast had some technical challenges. Their data was even worse off. And so they got back with them within about 7 to 10 days. And so we looked at the results of that, and it was off the charts as far as the West Coast versus the East Coast. And I remember a guy saying, well, it must be the training in the call center. It is different when they're reaching out. No, it's not. It's because you're interacting with the customer, well past that point of relevancy to, I think one could even map out that at some point, there's value if you hit them immediately, but then it starts plummeting really quickly. And at some point, you call them, interact with them, you're just gonna annoy them at that. Wow, yeah, I took care of that, funds are someplace else. And now you become even more irrelevant. A little bit on the how. If we look at, and this is the idea of data reuse, which I think is critical, not the end-all be-all. We don't. Again, this idea of one version of the truth for everybody is kind of a panacea. But if you can take a step in that direction, and if you're building out a new engagement model with your customers, and you've got a significant customer event, we're going to zero in on that. And you look at the data required for that, and you deploy that, you're going to find these other opportunities, readiness and ability to execute the size of these bubbles based on value. Do customer event first. You're going to find some of these other ones that, we're going to see what our customers, kind of track them on what they're doing online to infer interest. You're going to find that once you do this, a lot of these are going to all of a sudden slide over magically because a lot of that data can be reused. And so there are techniques out there, traceability matrix, data overlap analysis, that can take advantage of that. And so, and I won't go into the technicalities of this, but did this for one client where they had their initiatives, analytic capabilities, business outcomes, each one of these, figured out what was the value of being able to do these capabilities, and then where is there overlap. Once we get this data, if we get this data, oh, look at that, 55% of that data is now available for the online wealth management research project that we want to do. Oh, maybe that'll be the next one we do. So it's a great way to kind of prioritize and keep more of a discipline as far as being good stewards of the data. So this, on the analytics side, I want to end on this one. Claudia Imhoff up in Boulder, I believe, where she's still at, Intelligent Solutions. This is one of her slides. I attribute it to her. But we look at the old world where data was locked up in the silos within the four walls. Only certain people had access to it. You must submit requests and then wait some ungodly amount of time for a response. And so business started, oh, forget this. I'm going to go build it myself, hence proliferation of data all over the place. But getting it into more of empowerment, getting that data analytics out into the business, get it out to the front lines where there's client interaction, and maybe our folks that are engaging with the customers can have smarter dialogues and encourage citizen data scientists, and giving more tools to the business analysts who don't have the high technical coding skills, give it out to them. So quite a change, and I think one of the things that's very clear is cultural shift is extremely difficult. So a little bit on cybersecurity. So that's a new area. I'm coming up to speed with cybersecurity, as I mentioned. There's a lot of great third-party research that's taking place out there regarding surveying companies who have been breached. There's different thresholds, $1 million or more in losses because of the breach, or 10,000 records. So there's a number of different sources out there. This one happens to be a global, but they have a lot of, you can break it out by the US, the Pomon Institute. Oh, look at that. I thought I attributed it. Ooh, shame on me. This is the Pomon Institute. They do this once a year. Don't hold me to it. I think there's like 525 or something like that, clients that they have surveyed, customers. But an average cost of a data breach globally, 3.9, and that's 10,000 records or more. And then the highest was the U.S. at 8.1 or $8.2 million in cost. And in some cases, you can imagine that's actually understated with damaged market capital. But what gets scary is how long these exploits are living in the network, living in the cloud. Maybe came in through DevOps at a vendor application and has now been updated, and it's just sitting there waiting to be detonated. But we've seen a lot of breaches, a lot of dollars go out. I was looking at some recent research where they were trying to figure out, okay, what if you were trying to, I get that if you see an intruder, a breach, that before I go, sending the flag up the pole to, hey, we've been breached, let me make sure I understand it, where it is. Let's see if we can't contain it. We understand where it first entered our ecosystem, if you will. So I get that there's a reluctance to just immediately pull the trigger and announce that you've been breached, and so you need to do research. That's where GDPR gets a little confusing, because they have requirements on how fast you have to disclose, and sometimes you don't know enough just yet, not to be an apologist for them. But anyway, a lot of big impacts. Anyway, the research I was talking about, they were looking at, okay, what if customers are, hold their proverbial cards closer to the chest, and they're not saying anything, and think Equifax, so that they're not saying anything, versus the ones that, okay, this is what we found, and they're more open. There was a Norwegian company, I need to get the name of the company, I need to write it down so I retain it, but they were like a poster child in this research for being very candid. They had the poor CFO, okay, are going to go out there and talk about the breach. And you're going to be our spokesperson. And he did a terrific job. And so there was an idea that the more transparent, that the less damage is done. That if you're transparent, you talk about your lack of visibility and controls and enforcement and what you're doing about it, that may actually might be better off. So a little bit about the realities of today, kind of a simplistic graph. But if I look at the U shape there, and I think about the bad guys, the adversaries, the cyber criminals, their costs are plummeting. You probably know, you go out to marketplaces out there and peruse and say, oh, I want this exploit. I want this malware. Oh, you got something that has ransomware? Oh, I want that. Oh, you have this data. Oh, how fresh is it? Let me see. People have commented. Oh, this is good data. This is fresh, personal, identifiable information. No, that's dated. And so there's this whole marketplace. You buy it and then you install it, and then hey, this isn't working. You call up the help desk and they'll help you through it. And so their costs have really come down, becoming far more efficient and savvy, and the tools and more machine learning capabilities bring to the table. So their costs have been plummeting. Meantime, the good guys defending against all this, these bad guys, their costs have been skyrocketing because organically what they've been doing in this kind of like analytics space is they're just buying the latest widget. And we have a end user endpoint protection at the laptop. We have a gap in our. So we have there's another vendor. We'll bring in that vendor. We want to do more analysis, behavioral analysis. Oh, that's another vendor. Oh, we need firewalls. Okay, we have firewalls over here. And so they've just kind of grown this stack of vendors, and it's become incredibly costly to do that. And so what we want to do is invert these curves. And that point A really looks, and this understates the problem. If you look at all these requirements and their current state and all the different tools that are out there, this gets incredibly difficult to manage. And I've talked to one particular large entertainment company in the US who we did a deep dive on this, and they had 43 different vendor solutions in this space. Another company I'm working with had 83 different vendors. The biggest one I've seen is 226. They're just throwing vendor solutions, what they call defense in depth, or kind of corny term that we say, defense in expense is what you're doing, just throwing money at this. Anyway, this CISO, just spelled that one, said this is not sustainable, and went up to the board and said we've got to fix this. This is chaotic. A little bit of an advertisement. I apologize, can't help it. But on Palo Alto Networks, we take a completely different approach. We look at this as a platform issue, and so we look at spanning the whole piece. And I'll go into this a little more in depth without. I'm not selling anything, but obviously. But we take a different approach, and I can tell you how many clients who have talked to some of our vendors, or rather competitors, and said, "Wow, you guys message this differently." And it's kind of like when I was at Teradata, when they said, "No, you guys are messaging this differently. You guys are a premium product, okay, a little more expensive, but you guys look at analytics differently at Teradata, Palo Alto Networks. You look at the cybersecurity ecosystem differently. You look at it holistically." And it's only getting worse with race to the cloud. Again, it just blows me away. How many companies don't know what they have in the cloud? Oh yeah, I think this one development group has spun up a couple cloud instances. I don't know what they have out there. Everybody bringing their own device, mobility, as far as the number of employees that are in coffee shops, they're in the network, they're out of the network, all over the place. All behavior changes, by the way. Which could be tracked. And then mergers and acquisitions, I think Marriott and Starwood, where Marriott could not these exploits were already in there, but employing their policies for visibility and control and enforcement as fast as possible. There are solutions to do that with a target acquisition, to bring them in the fold and under their compliance as soon as possible. But really, with the cloud solution, security requirements are key. I think it's almost comical, well, maybe not really, but particularly for Cap One, they had their breach, which we've I think all heard about. I don't know how many hours later it was that AWS came screaming out of the woodwork, "Hey, wasn't our problem. There's a shared responsibility model here." So we protect the infrastructure. They're supposed to protect the data, and that's true. And so that's a concern, is the security requirements. And unfortunately, the cloud is so appealing. You think, oh, I'll just say, hey, Amazon Marketplace. So, hey, what tools you have? We'll just get those. Well, okay, they're optimized, or rather, they're just for Amazon, but everybody has, Google Cloud Services and Azure over here. But what are we going to have different solutions for each one of them? Okay, we're building a chaotic cybersecurity solution matrix. Why not? That's what Palo Alto Networks believes. Why not just have one solution that's consistent across all the cloud providers, far less costly and less complex, if you will. And so that's why we want to put the SaaS solutions out there, public cloud, internet, data centers, tied in with the organization into one layer. And the reason why I mention this, because this gets into the analytics, because this is a platform approach. Not technical, but some people will say, some competitors will say, oh, you just protect the endpoints. Protect the endpoints, that's it, because you're protecting the perimeter, and you're good to go. But there are so many reasons why that is a failed policy, because there are so many other ways to get into the environment. So once you get that platform approach, and you get that into a cloud environment to deliver all the behavioral analytics and advanced analytics, and you think about all the log data that we have as far as where I'm going on to our corporate site, I'm going into a SaaS solution, I'm going out to the internet, I'm going into Salesforce, .com, I'm going into the HR system and going into the GL system. All that log data and controlling what I'm doing. What am I doing in the GL? And so controlling where people are active and where they are, whether they are in a data center within the network, or they're going directly to a SaaS solution, or directly to the internet, or they're on their laptop and they opened up an attachment when they were at Starbucks. Having all that in one environment, and when you have a holistic view of platform view, you have that wealth of data. So this is where things are exploding as far as the analytics space. And then you have the whole DevOps activity and security embedded in the serverless and the containers and so forth. So that's kind of our perspective, is it's a kind of a platform play, if you will. In the value piece, I come back to this, that executives believe that their processes, their data environments are more complex than they were 2 years ago. That means a lot of manual processes, cost, a lot of gaps in disparate solutions, risk gaps, business agility. One client, we talked about a business problem they had. They couldn't deliver it to the customer because security was saying, no, we can't do that yet. We're not there. But so many IT projects fail. And I think why they fail is because they haven't appropriately made the case. They haven't aligned business speak with IT speak, that little triangle I showed earlier. Linked what we're doing as far as technology solutions, we're bringing together the data we're bringing together, how that meets with the analytic capabilities, and then the business outcomes, and hits the vision, goals, objectives. So you can talk to the executives about this investment, this is how it ties into your selfish needs. And then tracking progress. That's where a lot of projects fail. There's that lack of transparency of what's happening. So we all know is when you're going to look at a business impact, you're going to look at operational efficiency or cost, business agility, revenue. You're going to look at the business protection risk. Really do need a holistic approach, and so that's what we do in our group is we look at, okay, what is the, I get that direct cost is number one, and maybe revenue too, but let's look at the indirect cost. Let's not ignore that because it's hard to figure out, maybe relatively. So let's look at it. Let's also look at how that might change our risk profile. Let's look at the whole, this holistically, and we'll prioritize into, okay, we'll show the direct cost, the direct revenue, indirect or soft, whatever verbiage we use, and then the potential risk impact. And there is a cost to this complexity, and we can quantify what that complexity is, where it is enabling it to not be agile, inconsistencies, because this one group has completely different policies on how they manage who gets access to what data to look for these new emerging insider threats that are happening more often. And the cost and then poor user experiences. Oh, it's taking me forever to get these files because it must be sitting out there someplace, being detonated in a sandbox to make sure it's okay before I actually open it up. Just a little bit real fast on risk. Again, there's a lot of good data out there in these surveys as far as what is the probability of a breach in any given year by organization, and this particular is a Wall Street Journal analysis on the maybe less sophisticated to the leaders, and pretty significant change in total if you go from a beginner to a leader in some of your policy enforcements. Can be huge. And we know risk is just a mathematical equation. What's the probability of a breach in any given year, and what's the exposure given a material breach? And let's multiply the two together to get an expected loss. So you can do that, and you can talk about, okay, what we're doing up front. Let's see if we can't adjust the probability, stop these things up front, and then maybe respond faster, and then organize our data, understand where our data is. Where's our most critical data? Not everybody knows that. And so a chaotic environment is going to place you further down on the curve as far as loss given a material breach. You're going to be down from the mean. There's no question about that. And I think with insurance, cyber insurance is in an infancy, if you will. But because they're trying to figure out, okay, how do we quantify a particular organization? What should we charge them as far as an insurance policy, and what will we exclude? And they won't know it. So if it's related to nation-state attack, policy doesn't cover it. But they're trying to figure out how to price this stuff out, and in some of these analysis, and we'll get better at this. In the U.S., like I said, the average is $8.2 million on an average cost of a breach. But there are mitigating factors. If you increase the visibility, if you increase control, if you increase enforcement, you can mitigate that, those costs, those exposures, if you will. And you can move from a current state to a future state of B, where we are doing more automated processes. We're bringing advanced analytics to the table. We're leveraging our investments. We're building a platform play as opposed to just throwing vendor solutions at this and hoping one of them sticks and prevents an exploit, if you will. And you're being more responsible. So what does it look like? It looks something like this, a platform play where you're doing prevention up front. Don't like this. You can't stop everything up front, of course, can't get 100%, but if you can stop it up front, then you don't have all this unproductive activity. Ooh, there's an alert. Okay, is this a false positive? Is it a duplicate? Could be a duplicate. And so you're not wasting a bunch of resources, but you're applying AI and machine learning and automating processes, but also looking for anomalies and all that rich log data that is now all in one environment because you've tied in the cloud, the network, and the endpoints. So that's our target state, and this is my second to last slide. So kind of stepping back a little bit, always like to, and this can be applied for in the analytics field, paint the vision state where we'd like to be, what are the characteristics of that vision state, and then, although I'm a finance guy, I'm very much kind of a frustrated social scientist guy. And so I'm a big advocate that you first pull the emotional cords before you activate someone's analytical thinking. You do that too soon, they start getting skeptical. So you talk about, okay, this is the current state, and stories. As humans, we like stories. That's how we retain a lot of information. That resonates with us. We talk about a current state and a future state. Then we ease into some of the larger impacts at a 30,000-foot level as far as the business outcomes on ripping out cost, operational efficiency, indirect, direct cost, risk mitigation, return on your investment, ease into the financials behind that, and then have some KPIs to track your progress. Big advocate that, Peter Drucker, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. So have those KPIs to track so you can see where you're off target in a variance on the project. So it's important. This is harder to do, and so many technology projects I think don't do this because first of all, IT is not really necessarily comfortable with doing this. And so a lot of the technology folks we work with is, I don't know how to communicate, how to convey this without glazing over senior management who's had it being glazed over. So we need a business messaging. And by the way, executives, those investments that you're making, we're going to track it. We're going to track it, and we're going to understand the dollars. Oh, by the way, if we want to be really anal, we have financial models behind it, our assertions. So that's kind of the life cycle of how I think IT projects can be successful. It really does, it has to tie in business and IT speak, if you will. You always have to be ready to articulate what's going on in the technology, how executives should care about that, why they should care about it for their own selfish needs. What are their key drivers and how are we going to measure it? Tell, analytic storytelling, tell the stories about it because that resonates. People can wrap their heads around that. Identify the business outcomes. This is how we're going to define success, and then tie value. Always interested in the economics. Okay, what kind of return are we going to get for this investment? So that was my last slide. Hopefully I give you a little perspective maybe of what I've seen out there in the analytics space and now new to cybersecurity. Thank you. Well, it's funny that, not to go back in time, but this is where the explosion is happening right now. And a lot of vendors are racing towards this, as I try to race to the slide, is once you have all that log data, right, there's a tremendous amount of information out here to find out why, hey, what is Paul doing at 2 in the morning in this region, accessing this data? He's never done that before. Oh no, actually he does it all the time. Okay, well, it's an anomaly, or he's touching different, going into different networks. And so this behavioral activity, looking at signatures that are, okay, it's a common signature. What's interesting about, we have a research group called Unit 42, which has really cool information that they give out to the public. Unit 42, you can find it on Google. They say that they know, like for instance, there's like 4 different areas, different groups in Russia that do their independent things out there. And then they say, and the reason why they can tell, because people are a creature of habit. They use the same behavior pattern and how they do implant their malware and their exploits. They use certain techniques that have worked in the past, so you can identify who's who. And then it's kind of interesting with Russia. Oh, and there's elections around the world. Oh, isn't that kind of interesting? These 4 or 5 groups. Oh, they're kind of coordinated. Isn't that interesting? That they're all now they're all orchestrated. But anyway, to answer your question, Chris, it's all that data, and you're looking for these patterns that, oh, I've seen this pattern before. This one is coming from China that typically looks for IP, or North Korea that's trying to get money, ransomware. They're out and about, or Iran, who's pretty much pestering Saudi Arabia. That's what they focus in on. But you can see these patterns because, oh, I know who that is. And so there's just a wealth of analysis, and there's so much investment in this area. Palo Alto Networks is doing tremendous amount of investment in this area because we think this is the end-all, be-all of having all this data where we can identify the latest, greatest techniques and then pump them out there, even for our competitors to utilize. So I think it's a huge growing area. Yeah.
How do you see the role of trust in these kind of analytics, right? So like when there's a huge data breaches, like the customer loses trust in any kind of product, right? But also like if I do trust you, I have to give up a lot of my personal data. So I basically entrusted with something which is very personal to me. So it seems like a huge trade-off. So
Yeah, that's a kind of a philosophical issue too, because like I mentioned, in EMEA, they look at that, wait a minute, that's the customer's data, it's their value. If they want to give it, then they should be compensated for sharing that information about themselves. And like I said, in the United States, it's buyer beware. Too bad, you shouldn't have done that. We're not going to protect you. And so it's a different philosophy here. I think we're going to see some change. We're seeing it in Washington and California are getting, oh, we like that GDPR. Those requirements, we're going to adopt those. And so there's a move towards greater protection on behalf of the consumer, but a lot of corporations love the idea of Cambridge Analytica comes to mind. Facebook made a ton of money selling that data, personal data. So the trust is huge. All the way down to social sciences, they've done analysis that if they take a picture from LinkedIn of you and or from Facebook, and then they morph it just a little bit and put that, someone wearing a sweater, and then another person wearing a sweater that's not related, you can't tell it's you, but there's enough psychologically, you'll gravitate to that. So there's a lot of manipulation going on out there that we don't even know about. That is a tough one. Facebook, people are kind of leery about what's going on there and the use of this data. That trust is a tough one.
All right.
So with respect to analytics, you're effectively talking about isolation at will, right?
Isolation what?
At will, when it comes to identifying anomalies. Are you guys using more machine learning?
Yes.
Okay, that was a question.
Yeah. Sorry to jump on that, but absolutely, because you can't keep up with the amount of data that's flying into here. As long as you're training those models, and then you're doing it in an ethical way, so you don't have biases in those models. But that's in Palo Alto Networks. We're not based in Palo Alto though. I don't know But in Silicon Valley, we are loading up on the data scientists, big time, because this is a big play. In my ignorant view of the world, coming from analytics, here my bias, I view cybersecurity is just going to be machine learning versus machine learning at some point, because we can't keep up with how fast these bad guys are churning.
All right.